turn the camera on, everything goes sideways.
Shanked that shot into the forest. Keep hacking away.
Keep hacking away. David Allston founded Belt Avenue, so I do outsourced business development. I work with private equity firms, family offices, some independent sponsors. Yeah, so I have a completely weird background to be doing anything further up in our industry. So I grew up in a country called Togo, West Africa, which most people haven't heard of. People have heard of Ghana if you follow U.S. soccer. But my dad and my mom were missionaries, and so my dad trained pastors. So between 5 and 16, I spent 9 years there. You know, when I got out of undergrad, I was going to follow my dad's footsteps and train pastors. So I worked at a church throughout my 20s. My plan was to train pastors and live in Kenya for the rest of my life. Fast forward to 30, organization I was a part of was growing really rapidly, and boots on the ground in Kenya kept getting pushed back. I finally went to them. I was like, guys, I'm working at a law firm to pay my bills, and I'm working here, working 80 hours a week, and I'm making $40,000 a year. Something's got to give. And so if I'm going to be in Kenya in the next 12 months, I want to stay. Otherwise, I got to do something else. And they were like, well, we're not ready. That was 12 years ago. They still don't have boots on the ground, so I'm glad I didn't wait.
Wow.
I had a mentor who had gone to law school, never practiced law, and said it was the best thing he ever did. So I figured I would give that a try. Ended up at WashU, got a JD MBA there. And as part of that program, I was a team lead on a project we did for Harbor Group in St. Louis. And so I had a 3-month job interview I didn't know I was having. Got to the end of that project and they asked me to come on board. Very much Cosmo Kramered my way into the industry. Harbor also had a different model in that when I joined, everybody started doing business development and moved into deal execution. And so the idea was never that you were going to do BD for your whole career. It was just sort of a stop along the way to doing deals. And like I said, I didn't know that was a job you could have. And when I got out there, I started to realize it was a really natural fit for me. Not super extroverted, but I like people and I like building relationships. And so I'm terrible at networking. Like if you see me at a big ACG event or something, I'm going to leave as quickly as I can. I do not like working in a room.
Well, in a traditional way, I might disagree with you. You're pretty good at networking, but I know what you're saying. Like showing up and talking to 65 people.
Yeah, I don't like that, but I like building relationships, which really works well for the sort of my style of doing BD, right? Which is you build meaningful relationships, because at the end of the day, it used to be that it mattered if you had money to deploy. Now it doesn't. There's so much money out there. So it's really about, like, all things being equal, you want to work with people you like and trust.
Sure.
And so if you can spend the time and build those relationships, it's a differentiator, right? And so that's where, you know, I felt like it was a shift when I was there away from, let's do the conference circuit, let's sit down and do 15, 20-minute meetings, let's go through your list and go through my list, and then we'll walk away and I'll send you a follow-up email. And you know, I'm not saying there's no place for that, but if you're building relationships, that takes time and energy and effort. And so that was the part that I really liked about doing this.
And then flashing forward to Belt Avenue.
Yeah, so the interim there is one of the things we did at Harbor that was a little bit different was we moved away from just focusing on banker, broker channel, and started to spend more time with trusted advisors, so lawyers, accountants, wealth managers, guys like you that see businesses, touch the deal world, you know, but don't necessarily have massive deal flow.
But building
really good relationships, and we focused on specific markets, so places like Memphis or Louisville or Indianapolis or Birmingham, Alabama, places like that. And so the idea was, instead of just going to conferences, you start going to those markets over and over and over again, and you build relationships and you start to feel like you're a part of that market. And so what happened, what we anticipated happening, what ended up happening over time, was we started having more opportunities that were proprietary. And I'm not saying, you know, we went from like 0 deals to 100 deals, but I think my last year at Harbor, we saw somewhere in like the range of 40 to 50 proprietary opportunities.
Yeah, wow.
Now the downside is a lot of those weren't a fit. And so that was part of the impetus for Belt Avenue, which was, if I could help those people connect to the right buyers, you know, you get paid, but also be more useful. Because what would happen is we'd be sitting at dinner and somebody would say, hey, my buddy owns 6 nail salons and wants to sell them. Would you buy them? And the answer was no, but then that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
And so the thought was, if you could become more of a resource sort of to both sides, right? Where the buyers, you're helping them find opportunities that they wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And then for the sellers, you're connecting them in a meaningful way, whether it's to the right investment bank or whether it's to the right buyer or whatever that looks like. You try to help them accomplish their goals. So I've always had a little bit more of an entrepreneurial bent, and so about 1.5 years ago I decided to go out on my own. And so what I do now is I work with groups on an outsourced basis where I have a handful that I represent.
When you say groups, you mean?
So it could be an independent sponsor, it could be a family office, it could be a fund. The sort of target for that would be an independent sponsor.
Buyers.
Buyers. Or like a smaller fund that doesn't have a BD function and is not really sure what they want, which happens to a lot of groups. They're like, we don't know exactly what we want to do, and it's a big hire. If you're going to hire somebody senior, it's hard to find a really good fit. And so, the way I do it is it's a retainer, and there's a success fee, but the goal is to really represent them the same way I would have when I was at Harvard Group or Middle Ground, like going out and being in the market, talking to people, representing them, waving the flag, helping them find opportunities. And so you're behaving the way you would if you were fully part of a team, with the exception that you're just not fully a part of the team. The benefit for the firms is that they're not having to take on, as much expense. They're not having, my retainer covers all my expenses. So one of the benefits is they know, outside of whatever deal success fees there are, they know what it's going to cost them to bring me in day one.
What's your ideal engagement look like now?
So I would say, I mentioned like a smaller fund, so call it sub 300 million range. I mean, I think somebody that, again, doesn't have that function but knows they need it, they value it. Part of it is I look at myself as part of the team, so then they're willing to get involved and engaged. So when you go to make intros, they're always ready to do that. And because, again, I want to be a conduit. I don't want to just be out there flogging the name without really helping them build their reputation in the market. And so connecting them to the right people, whether that's executives or whether that's bankers or somebody else in the trusted advisor network where it's like, hey, you should really know this person. And then like I'll have them come along on trips sometimes. And so if I'm going to spend 2 days in Houston, what I'll try to do is line up the most relevant people one of those days, and we'll do a day full of meetings, and then we'll do like a happy hour at the end of the day. And that way they can kind of get a lot of bang for their buck, and they're not trying to guess. Because most people that say we're going to do both, they'll be like, well, I cover Texas, and they'll take one trip to either Houston or Dallas once a year and be like, I covered Texas for the year. That's not really adequate. So trying to find somebody that gets that idea of, hey, we want somebody in the market all the time. Those are really good engagements for me. And then I would say there's another bucket, which is like a bigger fund north of 500 million that maybe has a BD presence, but they're like, we can't really cover a lot of those secondary markets,
like Alabama, like the ones you
places
mentioned.
in Alabama, Memphis, like even if you think about markets that aren't tiny, but it's like we're just not going to cover the middle of the country. Realistically, when you get to a certain size, 80 or 90% of your deals are coming from a smaller group of people, right? And so it's like we have to really cover those people, but it's like now that means we can't cover everybody else. And so that's where I can come in and I'm not necessarily representing the market, but if you could say, hey, we're gonna pay David X, and then we never have to think about those 10 to 15 markets ever. We know if there's anything there that's going to be relevant for us, we're going to see it. And the other thing that I'll do with people is if they say, hey, we built a list, like we're looking for flow control businesses, and we found 4 or 5 in Memphis, what I'll do is I will work my network in that market to try to get warm intros, because there are so many people cold calling, trying to get out there. We were talking about it earlier, right? Where it's like, hey, cold calling's not really the best way to do it. So, but if I can leverage my network to get a warm intro where like I'll go play golf or grab a drink or grab coffee or meal with the CEO of the company, then it's like that's a great starting place. And then it's like, okay, now I've really got this set. So when you come in and meet with them, they're excited to meet with you, and it's a very differentiated approach. So that's something I'll do with people at that sort of second level where I'm not necessarily representing them, but I can help them. I even had one person that was like, hey, there are people that you'll probably meet that would be good clients for one of our portfolio companies, and if you can make us intros there, that would be really helpful.
Got it.
So it's more strategic, and it's not sort of broad based, hey, I'm out here waving the flag, but if there are ways to add value in a strategic way, I'll do that as well.
You were hitting on it a little earlier, like there's an element of needing to be present at some of these larger conferences. But you can't just only do that, in my opinion. You have to couple it with building really deep and personal relationships.
I would say for me, it really kicked off aggressively in 2021 with like Ryan Grant. We traveled together 15 times that year. And traditionally it would be like, well, we compete, so we don't really want to go together. And now it's more of, listen, you're not going to be less likely to see a deal because two of you are there at the table, or at the same event. You're still going to see it. You're still building a relationship.
Two different brands.
Yeah. And so it's like maybe we're competing, but either way, generally if we're the right people, right potential buyers, we're both going to see it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I've found is that you end up getting to leverage each other's networks, which you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you value good people, I value good people. So it's like, okay, this is not just we're going to sit down and talk about what do you have come into market. It's we all value relationships, and so we're extending those networks and leveraging each other to do that. We'll do some more curated things. So think about like the North Star Vegas event, but smaller. So maybe it's 12, maybe it's 18, 24 people, but it's also one of those things where we're choosing who's going to be there. And so it's people that think the way we do, who are relevant and valuable, but also where I also think about it as like trying to help each other in our careers. When you're trying to think about how can I help these other people, then it tends to create this really great sort of virtuous cycle where you meet people, you're introducing me to people, and we just keep doing that over and over again.